So in our last video, we were taking a look at this array loop class, and we determined that the mult_all method was going to receive the integer array, num array passed by reference to the int array called values. It would, because of being passed a 2, it would double each of the values in that array. And because it was passed by reference, that change would occur also in the original array outside of the method, num array. And then on line 23, we passed that now modified array into the print values method. And in this video, we're going to take a closer look at that print values method. So here we have a for loop, and we're declaring a count variable I. We're going to loop one at a time because of the I++ through this array, starting at index 0 up until, but not including the length, so that we can avoid that index out of bounds error. And all we're doing is printing those values. We're not making any changes to the values. We're just going to output them. In that instance, where you don't need to make a change to a value in the array, you can traverse the array using a shortcut called a for each loop. Okay, a for each loop will traverse the array one element at a time from beginning, position 0, to the end, length -1. So in that for each loop, we just change inside the parentheses int, and we can call this one I for index like we had before. Then we have a colon and then the name of the array, which in this case is values, is what was passed by parameter. So now when we system out print line and we do our values element I, right, then we can go ahead and run. And we should get an index out of bounds error. Oh, are we stuck? Let's try running again. There we go. There's our index out of bounds error. Okay, array index out of bounds exception. Now let's look at why. Index 12 is out of bounds for length 5. So what does that mean? Our num array has 5 elements, okay, and our first element, index I, when we traverse this in the for each loop, this int I is not a count variable for the index as it was in the original for loop. Instead, this int I is referring to the value that is held in that original first position. So that value that's being held is the doubled value here, 4, and in that index, or in that array, position 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 5, so that would output a 5. Then it changes to the second value or second element in the array, and that's a 12 because it got doubled. And when it tries to go to position 12 in the array, that's out of bounds because this array only has 5 elements, and that's why we're getting the index out of bounds exception. So instead of printing values element I, right, we're just going to print the I, because I is the value in the array for the element that's at that position as we start from 0 and go to the end. So now this time when we run, instead of an index out of bounds error, we should get the doubled array output. And there is our array for 12, 14, 24, and 10. So this for each loop is great for traversing arrays if all you want to do is output the element in the array, or output information based on that element in the array. It is not Something that can be used though if you need to make changes to the individual elements in the array, because there's no way to access that index unless you were to add a count variable. And at that point, you should just use a regular for loop. Okay, so for instance, rather than just printing the values in the array, we could check and see, is that value even or odd, and then print it if it's even, for instance. So let's go ahead and make that change. So we'll come inside of our for each loop, and then we'll say if I mod 2 equals 0. Okay, then we can system out print line I, and then we'll concatenate is even. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that one. So 4, 12, 14, 24, and 10 are all even. Now that makes sense because we doubled all the elements in the array when we passed them to that array. Right? If we were to change this to a 3, right, now the method is going to triple all of the values in the array, so they will not all be even. So let's go ahead and test that one. And now we just get 6, 18, and 36. So when our 5 elements were tripled, only those that started as even were printed.